What surprises me about the energy in a graveyard is how open it is. So, when a lot of people think about a graveyard or the energy in a graveyard or the kinds of spirits or ghosts that attach themselves to such a place, it's always malevolent, isn't it? It's always negative. It's always like, um, you know, the stereotypical horror film or a ghost film where it's like these spirits are trying to take vengeance upon the living, or they want to seek revenge against a loved one, and they settle for some random teenager that runs through a graveyard. Um, but it's more like the energy of a tree. The energy of a graveyard. You have to understand that when people go to be buried there, when they are buried there, when people go to mourn there, it's all a part of the same singular process, the purpose of a graveyard. So when somebody dies, there's certain processes that happen, when they die. And there's certain energies that start to resolve within the body. But then there's other processes that only happen when somebody is actually buried. And not just because the processes of the actual, decomposition of the body or the coffin or, the air in exchange with the dirt around the coffin, anything like that. It has to do a lot with intention. Just like a lot of spells, just like a lot of spiritual techniques, intention and associations that we have with the body or that body has with what it believed during life has a lot to do with what happens when it finally gets buried. And a lot of the things that start happening when we first die, when all the energies start gathering themselves up to leave the body, a lot of those things can't really be engaged with unless it's down to the energies that are kind of left, which is usually what I engage with as a grave worker. Somebody who is engaging with energies that by the time the body and the person gets to a grave, by the time they get to a certain, whether it be a graveyard or a cemetery or a place where they are buried, it takes a long time for what remains, these latent energies, to actually begin their process. But when these energies do begin their processes, there's a whole lot of stuff stored up in the bones. There's a whole lot of stuff stored in the muscles. There's a whole lot of stuff stored into the fabric of the brain. Because when somebody's alive, there's certain thoughts that are kind of flamboyant or liminal or slight, where they come and go, but the vibration, the embracing of a certain vibration, the embracing of a certain frequency of thought throughout someone's life, those get more ingrained in the tissue of the brain, but also the bones and the heart. All these pieces that might experience little bits of fragmentary thought, but whatever somebody embraced like wholeheartedly and completely during their life, that energy will feed into the deepest parts of themselves, and that part will decompose in a graveyard. And that's a lot of the time what I work with, especially with older graveyards. But what happens if somebody is cremated? Then the same processes happen, but it's more wherever that cremation kind of happened. Those energies, they still have a certain vibration. They still have a certain way that they decompose, even if you can't see them, and even if they're not as material as you would have something decomposing in the ground. But in energy space, in a way, kind of astral, those energies still decompose in a way that is very similar to somebody who's buried. There's not as big of a difference between cremation and burial as one might think when it comes to energy. Because wherever somebody is cremated, those energies are going to go through the same processes. It's just going to be in a not as visible or obvious presence of that body. They'll just be kind of suspended in that area. That's why like cremation places might feel there might be like a really jarring energy, and a lot of people's like, oh, it's hot in here, or oh, there's obviously these kind of oven things, that's why there's a jarring energy. No, it's like there is energy suspended that is still processing sometimes. that you can't really put your finger on, so it becomes unnerving. But when it comes to bodies that are being processed, just the normal way, being buried, or being cremated on a singular place where that that place is where the ashes are going to be. They're not going to be moved. Um, the the deepest parts of our vibration, who we are, and what we've embraced most in our life, those exchange energy with the other vibrations in an area, the other vibrations in a graveyard, or in those cases where somebody's cremated, perhaps they're just in that little cremation like room or that big area. But in a graveyard, especially if there's dirt, and there's, of course, in dirt, there's always these minor, fragments of metal, minor fragments of various material that tend to pick up things better than just a building where people are just kind of cremated. I'm not trying to turn anybody off from cremation. I'm just trying to describe like how energies work in these circumstances. But when you're in a graveyard, the exchange between the energy of somebody who's buried and all the other energies around starts happening. And it really takes a while for people who are buried over like a few 100-year period to all those energies just kind of meld, because you have some older ones who are really on the outs, and they just have a little bit of energy left, and they've almost completely processed into the earth. And then there's newer and newer ones but there's a little bit of that energy from all these different phases exchanging with one another, as it filters back into the earth, because we borrow our life force, our spirit, if you will, from the earth, and it must go back in. And a lot of the time, it's not just the body, once again, or it's not just the identification with the body. It's the thought of others and ourselves that the spirit is there. So in a way, the life force is there. Maybe not completely, but if we think of our life force being somewhere, if we think of an association with our body and us being alive, and it being in this platform, then it's more likely to have to go through the process of actually the life force being there and having to feed back into the earth wherever your body is placed. Especially since there's, especially in my community in North Texas, there's a whole lot of people just being buried. Not cremated, more and more cremated, and that's not a bad thing. But there's a whole lot of people buried still. I actually kind of want to be cremated, but in a different way than what I'm talking about in this video. But anyway, so when you have all these different energies kind of coalescing in a graveyard, kind of communicating, speaking with one another, interchanging, it's almost like there's all these cups of water that get dumped into a basin. And the basin is kind of connected with everything around it, but for the sake of this analogy, we'll talk about a basin. All these cups of water in a basin, and they keep mix and mix and mix. It's so hard to feel one person's energy in a graveyard, or one individual, even kind of person in a graveyard, because it's this basin. All the energies are mixing. All of them are kind of whooshing and washing together. All their various subtle likes, dislikes, and all their beliefs in how strongly they believed in something like America, or something like Christianity, something obvious like that, or something like freedom. Like all these things kind of come to like a weird energetic subatomic level and just start blending with each other in this basin that is a graveyard. And ultimately everything's a graveyard, and everybody ends up being topsoil of one nature or another. But because we focus on these certain areas called graveyards, because we think of them as graveyards, and because we associate our bodies with them, they actually become these vortexes. These basins that we put all our energies into kind of become vortexes that kind of all the ideas and understandings of other places that we don't think of as graveyards kind of starts funneling into this place, because we do think of them as graveyards, or this is where we're mourning. This is where we think people are buried. This is where we end. And because we think these things, the living, while we're alive, think these things about these places, then these basins draw energy from other places where these ideas are being had, and become kind of a whirlpool. Um, I've often said that when I go into a graveyard, I never get bored. There's all kinds of energy to exchange with. There's all kinds of ways to exchange with the ground, with the spirits, and whether it be standing in a certain way, placing your tailbone against a grave, and kind of erecting your spine and standing there and really just connecting through your tailbone, or if it's placing your hands on a grave and you're just focusing on saying a certain mantra, Om Kling Kali Ke Namaha, or Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya, something like that, holding onto the grave, the texture of it, and you're placing your body awareness through the grave and into the ground. And I've talked about this in other videos as well, but really the way to connect with the dead is isolate and figure out what you feel like in your body awareness, the edge of your consciousness around your body, the edge of your feeling around your body, what you feel like is you. And then you just kind of move it down and into the ground. And this may sound extremely strange, but that's kind of how you connect. It's, because we build up this body awareness so much during our lives, but if you figure out how to kind of jostle your consciousness while closing your eyes, just kind of like jostle that consciousness, and then not that's the material of your body, not that's the edge of your person, but you try to move that self-awareness into the ground, through a grave, into the ground, or just into the ground, or into a tree. When you're holding a tree, move it into the tree, move it into the ground. Or if you're just trying to get to know a tree, just go into the tree. And sometimes visualizations help. Like, okay, just visualizing, think of blackness. And then you see your energy as kind of like this light. And then you kind of see the outlines of a tree or a grave. And then move your energy into the ground and just kind of visualize, lines on the ground in this blackness, and move your energy there to feel that. It may take a lot of practice, but this is something that I can do body awareness somewhere else. And that's something that, honestly, I think anybody can do if you practice enough. And it's not just about belief, though. You have to actually feel it, but you have to practice in order to feel it. It's not something that, it's something that I think the material sciences will understand at a future date. It's just not anytime soon. But our awareness can be moved. Our consciousness can be moved. And graveyards can be interacted with in a number of ways. Just remember that the dirt, all these different parts of our spirit, the life force, ego, consciousness, body affiliation, everything is being mixed. Everything is being mixed down there. But when you connect to it, it's extremely welcoming, because a lot of the time, most of the time, people aren't going to graveyards to connect. They're going there to mourn. And there's just all this energy is just waiting to connect to somebody who is willing to connect to them, waiting to give you a kind of energetic hug that they just don't get otherwise. And it's never just one person like, Grandpa Billy Bob, just connecting to you. No, it's all these energies kind of mixed together, and it might take that form and that feeling for you, but really it's just the energy of a graveyard wants to connect, because this ability to connect, or this understanding of a graveyard and what it is and the energy, has been kind of lost. And this energy just wants to connect. It's not suffering. What energy is left, the soul can't be tied down, it moves on. But what energy is left, and that is merging, is still kind of identified as being human and with a certain attributes, but is, on its way to melding back into the earth, because there's a whole bunch of stuff just melding into the earth at any given time. I mean, that's what most topsoil is. And it takes a while for all these life forms to merge back into the earth. But in graveyards, once again, because we think of them as graveyards and we associate our death with graveyards, that's where they become whirlpools for these energies. But when this energy is there just waiting to connect to you, and you can connect to it. And as long as it's not a graveyard where there's a bunch of like traumatic deaths and a bunch of just painful experiences or brutal killings on a land, something like that, The welcoming nature of a graveyard will be something that you should connect with. It'll make you feel connected to the earth. It'll make you feel more connected to that part of yourself that is life force. There's only some graveyards or some places that shouldn't be connected with, but overall, the energy of a graveyard, for the vast majority of graveyards, is just welcoming, and you can connect to it and feel yourself in a way that you never felt before. Feel the earth in a way that you've never felt before. So the energy of a graveyard is welcoming. Connect to it. It's okay. As long as it's not a place where it has a lot of trauma or like some kind of battleground that was just completely, just some kind of awful experiences that happened there recently or in the last 300, 400 years, then connecting to graveyards isn't a bad thing. It's something that can be very refreshing and energizing for you as a spiritual person, or as a person in general. But I mean, usually spiritual people watch these kind of things and try to do these things. Otherwise, somebody who doesn't believe in any of this, trying to do this, it might be a little bit harder. Because a lot of time when we set up those barriers and those walls in our minds between ideas or between understandings or our association with things or things existing at all, it's much harder to do things. So it's good to just let those floodgates through and try to connect to things. But yeah, this has just been a video about graveyard energy. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been interesting. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot them down in the comment section below on YouTube. Hit that like button down there. It really helps out the channel, gets traffic to this video and to the channel in general. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. Feel free to share this wherever you like, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day.